Hey guys, this is John from US Dash Camera. Today I got a review on the Mini 0906. Now a couple different companies manufacture this. This one was made by Veckle. They were the ones who provided it to me for review, and it is available through Amazon from them. So of course I'll provide links down below. Now this mini camera, like a lot of the other mini cameras, uses a very similar design, but it does have a rear channel. And not only does it have rear camera, it's 1080p front and rear. So I feel like dash cameras have come quite a ways in the past few years where even a cheap camera or affordable camera like this can have rear 1080p. It does come with some wedge plates if your window is curved and you need to align the mount a little bit better. So it's thoughtful that they include these. You can use two at once if you have a really curved window. So you would place those under the main base mount. That could straighten the camera for you. Have some screws. I believe that's for the GPS mount. The rear camera. This little plastic piece fell off right when I picked it up, and it actually kept falling off over and over again. I ended up just leaving it off because it kept falling when I was messing around with the camera. So it does use this very, very long cable to connect to the front camera. Comes with a standard power cable. It does have a USB port, which is nice. It's really cool is this actually has this wireless remote that you can either save a screenshot or lock a video file. So that way you can mount that maybe on your steering wheel, and it's a lot easier than reaching to the camera. So that string is for removing adhesives. Got some cable clips to help with cable management. Just a data transfer cable. A little cleaning cloth for the screen, and of course the manual. So it comes with quite a lot. There are additional accessories too, which I will go over. Looking at the camera, like I mentioned before, it looks very similar to a lot of the other mini cameras. It does have a power port in the mount, front or back, or you can actually power it directly through the camera because it's detachable from the mount. Here you can see there's a select button in the middle and then an up-down button. We got the rear camera and then another USB for either data transfer or power. So it removes pretty easily, and I do feel like this is an improvement over previous mini cameras. I think this connection feels a lot sturdier, so I am happy about that. It does spin up and down like previous mini cameras. We got the memory card port and HDMI output. And there you can see the branding by Veckle. So overall it's pretty standard from what I was expecting from a mini camera. But of course then we got this rear camera which does rotate. That part is connected, you can't remove it, so the cable provided plugs into this, which means you can't just use any micro or mini USB cable, you have to use the one provided. So another cool feature about this camera is it does have a parking mode, so they did provide a hardwiring kit. Now it's worth noting that on the bottom right of this little box there is a switch, and you need to make sure to switch that on, because I didn't realize I didn't have mine on and I was wondering why it wouldn't switch to parking mode. You gotta trim this wire a little bit too because they don't give you anything to work with, so using wire cutters you can get a little bit more exposed wire when hardwiring it. So the way the parking mode works is when your car shuts off, it detects your ignition is off and it switches to a 2 frame per second in the 720p mode, and then if it senses an impact it will start recording 720p 30 footage. So it's not as good of quality as the normal mode, but it's better than just plain motion detection to me. Now I'm pretty sure the Veckle bundle does come with a CPL adapter. I don't know if all the Mini 0906 cameras will, but it does connect magnetically. It's specifically designed for this camera, and if you don't know what a CPL does, it reduces the reflections in the windshield and sometimes provides better color also. but there are some drawbacks. It can make the picture look slightly blurrier, and it does make the image darker, so you might have to adjust the brightness if you do use this, especially for when you're driving at night. So let's go ahead and power it up, and I'll show the menu real quick. Now most of the menu is pretty similar, so I'm going to speed through some of it, but I did want to point out a few special things. This camera does do 1080p 60 if you're using it in just the one channel mode. If you plug in the rear camera, it automatically detects it and it switches to 1080p 30 front and 1080p 30 rear. So personally, I don't think this camera would be worth using just by itself. If you're buying it, you should be buying it intending on using the second channel. So there are, like I said, a lot of the standard features such as resolution, video quality, exposure levels. Now one unique thing is you can flip the video vertically or flip it horizontally as if it's a reversing cam, but personally the screen is so small and more than likely you're not going to be able to see the screen from where you're mounting it, so it seems a little silly, but those options are there. Of course it's got the typical GPS stamp, speed stamp, if you want to put your own driver number on here. So like I said, most of the options are pretty similar. Like I said, if you want to use the CPL, you might want to bump the exposure up because it might make the image darker. Well, really though, you should test it out for yourself and view your footage and see if you're happy with it and then make adjustments. So considering this is a 2-channel system, even though this does use the Sony IMX 290 or 291, which is supposedly the Starvis sensor, it doesn't look as good as, say, an A119. But that is to be expected for any 2-channel system. It's going to take a bit more processing power to render or process both the front and rear channels, especially when this camera is doing it at 1080p front and rear. Currently this camera is about $140 on Amazon, and that's really cheap considering Blackview didn't introduce a top-of-the-line 1080p front and rear camera until just this month, September 2017. So their DR750 just came out, but this camera that's way cheaper has 1080p front and rear, 30 frames per second, so it is pretty competitive. Now here's the rear footage. You can read the license plates, of course, when cars are right behind you, but times like this you might have trouble reading them when they're off on the side. But it's, I'd say, about on par with most other dual channel cameras I've seen. There is a Street Guardian camera coming out pretty soon that I expect to have probably some of the best footage from a 2-channel system, but that's likely going to be at least twice the price of this camera. At least that's what I'm speculating, so don't take my word for it yet. But for the price, I think this camera, at least in my opinion, does have pretty good video quality, because just a year ago there's no way you could buy a $140 dash camera with front and rear 1080p with this decent of quality. Now, even though this supposedly has the Starvis sensor, I was pretty disappointed with the night quality. I'd say it is decently bright, but it seems still pretty grainy. It doesn't seem as crystal clear as, again, the A119, but even though I keep going back to that, it's not really fair to compare a 2-channel system to a single-channel camera. If you really care about video quality and night quality, then you're more than likely just going to need to look at a single-channel camera and possibly doubling up on 2 single-channel cameras. But there's a convenience factor of just having one system and running one memory card that saves both the front and rear video to the same memory card. Now, one thing I did want to point out is, other than a few times in parking mode, which I assume the GPS isn't necessarily on until you start your car up again, the GPS did seem to always work. I've heard reports of a lot of people complaining that the GPS wasn't working in some of the previous mini models. but sometimes that's sort of hard for me to test the long-term reliability because most of the time I don't use a camera for more than a month, and you could have those kind of issues at 2 or 3 months or maybe a year after you buy it. But all I can really say is the GPS did work for me reliably. I did notice that it wasn't on during the parking mode files, and I wanted to talk about that. So you'll see here pretty quickly some clips they might look lower quality because it's only 720p and it's only at 2 frames per second but plays quicker. So here you can see it looks like fast motion. So this is when it's just recording in that low frame rate mode, and then once it detects an impact it will start recording 720p 30 frame per second video. So I think that is actually a pretty good solution, while I still prefer the buffered automatic parking modes from Blackview, Thinkware, and a lot of other Korean cameras. Yeah, I think this is a decent alternative, and again, this camera is so much cheaper. With a really low 720p 2 frame per second video, you're still getting decent enough quality that you can see the license plates of cars that are backing into you, and if they do back into you, you're going to get the video of 720p 30 video of them driving away too. So it might be a compromise to some, but for the price I think it's a decent parking mode option. And if you compare that to the A119, at least when I had it, maybe they've updated the firmware, but when I reviewed it, it only had motion detection, and you would just have to leave motion detection on at all times. It didn't know when your car shut off. It would just stop recording when it didn't sense motion. But that also means while you're driving around, it's still in motion detection, which the Viafo claims you shouldn't do. People do it anyways, and I haven't heard of anyone having issues with it. But they claim you could potentially lose files or corrupt files because it's not meant to run in motion detection all the time. And you also need to buy something like a PowerMagic Pro with that and set a timer or something so it's not just running 24/7 every day of the year. So I think this parking mode option is better than what the A119 offers, at least when I was testing it and using mine. But of course you're not getting as good a video quality as the A119, but for only about $40 more than the A119 you are getting a second 1080p rear channel. So I think this camera is actually pretty decent, a decent value. I think if you're looking for a 2-channel camera but don't want to spend $200 on the Blackview DR490 2-channel or $400 on any of the top of the line Blackview or Thinkware cameras. Now I can't say I've tried other cheap 2-channel systems. I did try Blackview's cheaper 1080p 720 camera recently, the DR470, and it was okay. I would probably take that over this camera actually, but it is significantly more expensive than this one, or at least $40 to $60 more expensive depending on where you get it. So it's something to consider. Overall, I'd say my main concern would be the reliability of this camera, and like I said, I can't test this for a year, so I can't possibly tell you that. If you're watching this review, maybe just check out some reviews, check out the forums on dashcamtalk.com and see if people are having issues with them. Sometimes they pop up, and a lot of times these cheaper, more affordable Chinese dash cameras do have more issues than some of the high-end cameras or from companies like Street Guardian. So it's definitely something worth considering, but based on how many issues previous mini cameras have had, it is something to be wary of. So if you're willing to take the cons with the Pro of this camera, I think it's a great option for the price, and I would definitely look into it. Besides having that decent 1080p front and rear, I do really like the automatic parking mode for the value of this camera, and I do like the fact that they offer the CPL adapter that's designed specifically for this camera, and I also really like that little wireless camera where you can lock files or take screenshots, and you can mount that little button on your steering wheel or somewhere convenient. So I'd definitely check it out. it does seem like they thought about all the different features people like in a dash camera and gave all of those in one really affordable camera system. So yeah, definitely check out this camera if you're interested in a very affordable 2-channel system. Of course, I'll provide the links down below if you're interested in the description. So if you like this video or my other videos, I'd appreciate if you hit like and subscribe, of course. And as usual, drive safe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.